And we're live. Welcome everyone for tuning in. You are watching The Barracks with your host Teray Nasheed. Going live to x.com in a couple of minutes to be able to host a space with the Yankee Tanky, with Joey Shantz, the Yankee Tanky, and with DD Geopolitics to host a space on X. We'll be broadcasting it here to YouTube and Rumble as well, so make sure, share it up. If you want to participate in the discussion, make sure to follow the Barracks on X at the Barracks Live. We always encourage you to hop into the space we'll be setting up now. I'm going to turn the music back on, get some people in the X space, get some people on the YouTube, go to subscribe to us on Rumble, link for all that stuff in the description. I want to see some goddamn energy! We have Jackson Hinkle holding the line down in Beijing, China. What the hell are you lazy slobs doing? I don't care if you're at work. God damn it, I work 60 hours a week and I'm still holding enough time to host a space on my day off. Holding the line. I want no excuses. Get people in here. We're going to be starting the space in a couple of minutes. Let's go. If anyone's on X, the space is live. I'm having trouble hopping in on my personal account. I'm not sure what's going on there. But the space is live. If you want to participate, make sure to go hop onto the page for the Barracks on X at the Barracks Live. Subterfuge. I don't know. Hang on. Let me try. Stop sharing my screen. Maybe it's because I'm on my individual account. But Elon Musk is not letting me share. Subterfuge, I say. So if I need to, So if I need to start a new space, that sucks. Yeah, looks like I'm just gonna have to start a new space. Oh well. So what I'll do is I'll start a new space, since as soon as Elon Musk goes to Auschwitz, this bullshit happens. I tell you, X is getting worse and worse by the day. Put a message in the comments if you think that X is getting worse by the day, because I certainly am already noticing the app getting a lot worse. All right. A lot of bots. I did the prank when you type help. I need help with my MetaMask wallet on Lord Bebo's X account the other day, because he said that he was being ironic when he said that Elon Musk was getting rid of all the bots, and I said, let's test this. I need help with my MetaMask wallet, and immediately 36 bots popped on in 3 minutes. He thought it was funny. Bebo thought it was funny, but I was laughing about that to myself the whole day. All right. welcome. Let's get some people in this X space. We are live on YouTube. We are live here on our X space. Had to do an emergency reset for the X space since this accursed app would not let me schedule the space I had set up on Saturday. I tried 10 different times and tried editing it, but 75 people had said that they were going to that. 75 people. The barracks is growing, and Elon Musk is trying to shut me down while he's on his apology tour in Auschwitz in Poland. We must work doubly hard, therefore, to get this space out there, to invite your friends. Joey Shantz, how you doing? Thank you for co-hosting this space with me. I'm going to give you the co-host.
Thank you very much. I am just sending out invites to get everyone back into the new space.
I know, I'm pissed. 75 people were scheduled. I was pushing that link hard, and it's no longer.
Yeah, Sarah was also pushing that out as well.
Blows.
Yeah, we're waiting for Sarah to come in. I think she might be still occupied in the space right now. And then I also think Samara Khan said she was going to show up because Sarah wanted her to comment. So we're also waiting for her, as well as all the other people Sarah will be bringing in.
Yeah, we got. We're gonna get all of the biggest the biggest brawlers in the communist space, in the ex-communist space. All those who are feared by establishment voices in three-letter agencies, who are feared by pseudo-leftists, by the Soros left, by the JQ low IQ right wing. We are feared for our principled stance on upholding the legacy of Stalin, upholding the legacy of Vladimir Lenin. So we have other people requesting the mic. Avi. All right. Let's get some people the mic, shall we? Can you all hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just gonna blow dry my hair really quickly while the room fills up.
Well, don't mute your mic if you're gonna blow dry your hair. We want.
I'm gonna.
No, we want
so
that
many rules in this space already. Can't blow dry with the mic open.
We want that electronic ASMR. Put it on low volume. You know, we gotta appeal to the porn-addled, porn-addicted, ASMR-minded, horrid perverts, layabouts, and degenerates, and ensnare them with facts and logic once they actually hop into the space. Our trap has been set. Everyone share the space out. Elon Musk was fucking with me, not letting me schedule the space that I had 75 people said they were attending, but we persevere. We got, all right. Joe, are you back with us?
Now I'm back with you guys. I do apologize. I don't know what kind of technical difficulties I was having on my end.
No worries. You know, now that we're in 2024, all that crypto money I was investing is rolling in. I'm gonna have to give you a new iPhone. I'm gonna have to buy you a new iPhone with all that crypto money I have coming into my Coinbase wallet. Inshallah, it will happen. You will have a new iPhone by the spring. But we have, while people are rolling in, we have our guest here, DD Geopolitics, Sarah from DDG, a real one, We're going to be getting more panelists in the room. Always request the mic. If you have something to say, we're going to have a Q&A towards the end of our discussion. Why America needs MAGA communism. If you are here, a longtime DDG fan, and you are now a genius on geopolitical conflict, and you're asking yourself, why in the world should we be concerned about MAGA communism? Well, we're going to lay it out for you. We are laying out how all things are connected. We're very schizophrenic in here. All things are connected. There are no coincidences. But since we have our biggest panelists in the space, Joe, you want to kick it off? What you had a little introduction. Wanted to lay out. Who is it?
Yes. So if you give me one moment, I'm going to pull up my notepad. I'm just going to be muted for about like 15 seconds.
Are you also blow drying your hair?
I'm finished. Stop being a brat.
That was quick. I know how long your hair is. There's no way your hair is completely dry.
Yeah, I'm literally done. I'm blow drying my hair.
Suspicious. You ever notice that DD never blow dries her hair on camera?
It's almost like I don't have any hair or even a blow dryer.
Yeah. You ever notice that
You never see me in the same room with the blow dryer.
with a blow dryer?
Schrodinger's
I'm not
dryer.
saying Sarah from DD Geopolitics is bald. I'm just saying there's a lot of coincidences that I'm noticing.
Jesus.
Hey, Joe, you got your notes pulled up?
Yes, sir. Yes, I do. So, first of all, I want to formally welcome everyone into the space. I greatly appreciate you guys being here and talking about the importance of an American communism. So that would be an American communism or a communism with American characteristics. And it's fundamental, not just for us to have a genuine communism by and for the masses, but absolutely is necessary to gain popular support amongst the masses themselves. With that being said, I'm now going to be quoting a popular American revolutionary named William Z. Foster. And this was in his book, The History of the CPUSA. And this is on specifically page 565, and I'm just going to read it out to you guys. Thus, in the domestic sphere, the party supports now and always has supported every piece of state and federal legislation of progressive character. It militantly defends the Bill of Rights and democratic traditions. It is the most resolute enemy from the present fascist-like attacks on the people's democratic liberties. It opposes the current military domination of the government, the industries, and the schools. Its purpose, a people's peace coalition against the Wall Street warmongers. It fights against inflation and every attempt of the government, of the employers and their labor leader allies to throw the burden of war preparations upon the workers and the lower and middle class. It opposes with concrete measures the denigration of American culture that is being fostered by fascists and war makers. In all of these general respects, communist policy is obviously in the interest of the American people. I think the conclusion we must draw from William Z. Foster's words that we have to have, or rather, we must have a communist America, and we must represent the interests of the common American man. So from here, we're going to be talking, we have 4 important topics we're going to be covering in the regards of what is needs to be considered for an American communism. And the goal is to have dialogue between all of us panelists on this panel between these 4 topics. So with that being said,
can you bring up Samira?
Yes, Teray, if you could get Samira to come up onto the panel as well.
Well, Samira just hopped out. A. B. Don't tell me what to do on my own space. C. I appreciate we're doing some reading in here because while we're waiting for Samira to come back on the mic, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a common criticism amongst all y'all. You don't read.
Don't even start. I was literally just reading a book.
I know. I've
Just
seen
a
your
book.
library. I've seen your library. I remember DMing you, and I said, "Hey, can you give me any recommendations on like military theory, on like geopolitics?" And you're like, "Oh, I don't know doctrine or theory." And then you showed me a picture of your library, and I was like, "Based." I see a lot of books that I've also read there.
So I guess while we're waiting for Samira, I will start on topic one. So this is the recognition of revolutionary history of the United States. And where I wanted to kind of start, and we could start anywhere because I mean, it all started in 1776, right? But I think a good place for us to start is the 1910s and 1920s, when you saw the coal miner strikes all throughout the Appalachian Mountains. My family, actually, on my mother's side, we come from these coal miners on Blair Mountain. A lot of my family lineage from that side of my family is connected to that. And it comes to the popular like word that used today usually as a way to insult a lot of white Americans is calling us a redneck. The rednecks were coal miners in West Virginia and other coal mining regions that wore red handkerchiefs around their neck. And what they were fighting for was uh, to be able to have basic sovereignty over their own lives. Uh, the coal miners were living in what is considered company towns. Something that you might notice that companies like Meta with Mark Zuckerberg and Google are seem to be setting up, resetting up these company towns. And what a company town is basically is a corporation owns a whole town. They own all the housing. They own all of the general stores or any other bars that might be there at this company in town. And they also pay their workers through company script. So they control the wages, they control the housing, and they control your ability to purchase any goods that you might need. And they often forced workers to purchase their own equipment. So you know, not just were these people having the whole of their lives being controlled, but even in the regards of the workplace, they were forced to buy their own equipment to be able to do the job that they're supposed to do. Now, a lot of these people were immigrants that came over from Eastern Europe. And these people, some of them were communists, some were not, but they all ended up working around communists to fight for their own sovereignty, to be able to have control of their own wages, to be paid with U.S. dollars instead of company script, to be able to rent and own properties that are not controlled by the company that they worked for. And these struggles often led to very bloody conflicts. In one case, Blair Mountain being the most famous of them, uh, after a certain point of resistance, after Pinkertons and other hired security were unable to control the miners, the U.S. government came in and bombed with freaking warplanes these coal miners. And a lot of people forget this history in this regard and how willing the American government is to fight against their own people. But the one thing I think we should all keep in mind is that people like these coal miners, they are the revolutionary spirit of the United States. Uh, Problems as this country has historically had, we've always had a progressive, revolutionary tendency that can be, you can see it all the way back from 1776 onward into you know, the 1910s and 1920s and farther closer to our present day. What our goal is to rebuild this revolutionary tendency and really get them folks to actually realize the power that they have through their labor and their ability to politically organize against the same ruling class that is bombing the Middle East and the rest of the world right now today. So with that being said, Teray, you had something I remember you wanted to briefly talk about in that regard as well.
John Jackman, who can't stay very long, because
Yeah,
we in the Infrared Collective are working ass men.
true that. True
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And Joey, actually, I love where you started with the coal miners in West Virginia. It's funny. I actually just got done reading a book. It's set a little bit later in the 1970s, but it's the Buffalo Creek disaster. I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar with that. But what that essentially was it's exactly one of these coal mining communities that you were talking about, Joey, where an impoundment dam owned by the Pittston Coal Company burst and sent over 130 million gallons and a massive, like 30-foot tidal wave of water, sludge, and debris into West Virginia's Buffalo Creek Hollow. Hundreds, actually thousands of people were injured and killed and disappeared. And, in my mind, this is, just another good example of how the legal framework in this country is weaponized on a class basis, right? And the story is all about I have a law background, so the story is about the legal struggle that went on, and the ultimate resolution of the case. But I think that what we're getting at, and kind of talking about folks like West Virginia coal miners, it's not necessarily just to center, right, this white working class, but it's the effort to try to show that what we're really focused on here is the class element of our struggle. And I think that what we struggle with in the United States is, right, in the idea in Marxist philosophy, you have what's called a base and a superstructure. And we get so preoccupied in the political discussions that happen in this country with the superstructure, right? With the some of the details of the institutions, the cultural norms, and that we can change things just by addressing these things at the superstructure level. But what our argument is that what you really have to do in order to ultimately change fundamentally the culture, change the way that people interact with each other, is to change the base, which means how we interact with the economy, how we produce our raw materials. For folks who are kind of in tune with the jargon, it's to address the means of production and the relations of production. And I think that's what we really need to, keep the conversation focused on, because we want to get distracted with, this and that cultural dispute that one group is, and in the law, right, we're taught this a lot. And to an extent, it's true, right? We're taught a lot about redlining. We're taught a lot about the racial basis and the racial prejudices that some of our legal institutions have, which are all true, but they don't just stem out of a vacuum. They have a material basis that's rooted in a class that's rooted in a class element. And so when we're looking back at the American Revolution, and when we're looking back at all the great progressive moments in the history of the United States, of which there are many, we have to recognize that those revolutions are fundamentally rooted in in a class struggle, and that was true in the American Revolution as well. And that's part of the reason why we are so insistent that the American Revolution indeed was a progressive moment. It was actually a historical world progressive moment. And what we see on the left from all these folks who sometimes call themselves communists is that the American Revolution was fundamentally bad. It was reactionary. Some people even say that it was regressive because of how the British allied in different times with native away from the feudal was dictated by a ruling class that was based in this royal prerogative to this development of this capitalist economy emerging, where you had wealthy merchants emerging in the American setting, where they wanted more economic freedom, and they wanted to fundamentally change who not only was in control of the economic institutions, but who was involved politically and setting the framework for how these institutions operated. And that was part of the great progressive moment of the American Revolution, was really kind of expanding that expanding democracy, if you will. And I think that's in many ways fundamental to the project of communism as well, expanding democracy. And when we talk about democracy, it's not just we have to open up our elections to more people, but it's about how do we engage the people in the process of creating the world in which we live. And when you look at the American Revolution, there is almost no argument that you can make that says that ability for the average man to be involved in developing the world and the nation in which he lived was expanded. And so I think that's a good way to kind of give us a little bit of framework for our discussion today. And I'm really interested in just maintaining that focus on the things that really underlie all of our cultural interactions, our cultural norms, the way that we interact with each other, the things that bubble up on the cultural level is all rooted fundamentally in how we interact with each other economically and how we interact with the material world around us. And then fundamentally, right, it's how the means of production and the relations of production are structured and situated. And if that goes unaddressed, no matter how many rainbow flags you have flying, which I would actually argue, in many ways undermines the effort to address these base elements that are so fundamental for a progressive revolution, you're just going to have rainbow fascism, and that's what we have coming in this country. And so I think that we all need to be on the watch to prevent that. So I'm really thankful for this conversation today, and for the Barracks and Joy for hosting. And then Didi, also have to shout you out because I've learned so much from your not only your Twitter, but also your Telegram. It's definitely a source of information and a way for us to boost our propaganda, right? So thank you.
Thank you for hopping in on your busy schedule. And yes, the rainbow flag is absolutely the flag of U.S. global imperialism. It's not the stars and stripes; it's the rainbow flag. It's not the stars and stripes that Zionists are waving alongside the Star of David on a bombed out Gaza. It's the rainbow flag that they're holding above their tanks. I'm not even joking. I'm not being ironic. That's just real.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that is exactly what we're seeing in the regards of Israel and Gaza and all. One of the things that I think that we need to focus on is that, your average American is not your enemy. It is your ally in the regards of fighting the anti-imperialist struggle. But to get back to specifically what we wanted to talk about, Teray, you were saying how there were also during the same time period a lot of people that were farmers that were being forced to work in California. Could you give some more details on that?
Yeah, the reason I think anyone in the in a leftist, I guess, movement in general, and in an American communist circles in specific, the reason there hasn't been any development for decades is because we're still trapped in misidentifying what the primary contradiction is that affects all Americans in common. And we're still stuck in this fantasy that was pushed by the new left, by the Frankfurt School type cultural Marxist, blue-haired leftists, who want an average blue-collar American to believe that America is still a colony, that the United States, the primary contradiction, the riddle for all Americans to solve that affects all of us on our daily lives, is that we're still a colony of a foreign power, and giving all of our individual, paying taxes to some foreign entity, in the UK, and that's in order to escape this, we're still expanding into the United States countryside, enslaving Africans and killing indigenous people, and all of that turmoil that was happening in the American countryside, though it was still a colony, when this like racial prejudice was, I guess, sort of institutionalized to keep that colonial engine going. But that's not, I mean, that period of US history is over. We can't go back and solve what already happened. We can only resolve the contradictions that affect us, that are ongoing, that are happening right now. And the period that we are in right now, that like the primary contradiction to solve, the riddle for all Americans to solve, is how we, now that our labor has been collectivized, now that we have been pushed off of our like family, like our small town family farms, being pushed into apartments for rent that we can't afford, and constantly unemployed and getting addicted to drugs. Now that, but still having to like work in this collectivized economy. Now that we're in the situation, how do we take control of that collective means of putting food on the nation's table? And that started in like a couple decades before the Dust Bowl, when like the best, I think, yeah. So the best example of that sort of accumulation of individual land under these like BlackRock style monopolies, the best example of that was John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. Like literally small time farmers, black farmers, white farmers, like that's what unites us all in this like present moment, and that's what united them back then in the the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, was these small time farmers getting pushed off of their land that their families had been developing and working and sweating over for generations. And then having to migrate into places like California, where they would like pick fruit for pennies on the dollar, literally for pennies on the dollar. That was a sort of primitive accumulation of land, and forcing these yeomen, like farmers, these traditional like independent farmers, to become wage laborers in cities and in shanty towns, and in collectivizing their labor in order to better exploit them for these super profits. Like that's the era we're still in. Like you read John Steinbeck today, or you read Jack London's The Iron Heel today, you read these books from like 100 years ago, and it's still relevant, because we're still in, like, that's the riddle that still needs to be solved. How do we wrest that power away from the monopolies, from the banksters, from the finance cartels? How do we wrest that power away from them and accelerate these forces of production, these tools we use to put food on our table?
Absolutely.
That's a great question. It's such a complicated question, obviously. And I think that in some ways it's better to start with what are some of the impediments that are preventing us from making those steps. And I think that in the American context, especially on the left, one of the things that is most common, we all see it, is moralizing about the past and the history of the United States, and basically saying that the United States is fundamentally fascistic. It's always going to be a settler colonial project, and land back, right, without any details about how you actually give the land back. And with that said, there's a lot to be learned about the past, right? We have to be able to look at the past in a sober way, be humble ourselves before history, and learn from it, and not be afraid to have critical thoughts about our own country. I think all of those things are valid, but also when you moralize history, you tend to deny it. And what we've gotten into in the American context is this just terrible nihilism, and it exists both on the left and the right. Right, on the right, you hear it in the sense that, the West has fallen, the United States is now this woke country, and the communists are coming, blah blah blah, and things, it's over for freedom. And then on the left, of course, you have what I just said, that the United States is this fundamentally right-wing situation. And if you accept either of those arguments, then you are basically consigning America to a position where it is no longer able to forge ahead and build its own history. And I think that something that we learned. I mean, there's just so much to be learned from all the different revolutionary movements. But when you're looking at when you're thinking about where do we go from here, I think that I always think about the Chinese example as being very instructive. And in some ways, I think that China already went through what we're going through today in terms of their cultural revolution and kind of the overcompensation to the left, and kind of having to figure out where exactly the American people are. And so I think that's our first task, is really finding the American people where they are. And that doesn't mean being tailist, but it means that that fundamentally it will be the masses and the working people who create the conditions for the revolutionary future. And that's why it's so crucial that we don't go to the MAGA rallies just with the intent and being comrades in arms and saying, "Oh, Trump's the greatest," but we go there to build a sincere bond with the people in the MAGA base, and to show them that we have so much in common, and that there really is the opportunity for us to utilize and capitalize on the revolutionary energy that exists. But it's just a matter of getting folks to really see it.
Absolutely agree with you. American Marxist Leninists, you had something to say as well?
Yeah, so I spoke. What you said reminds me of something. So there's a friend of mine named Daniel Burke, and I'm pretty sure you guys all know who he is. Daniel Burke told me something very important. He told me that if you don't go to the MAGA rallies, like talking to people about China and why we need BRICS and stuff, the Epoch Times and like the Falun Gong people, they're going to go to MAGA rallies and they're going to convince all the MAGA people to hate China, right? And even with Trump himself, the sort of people like I remember like watching a Trump interview 2 months ago, so influential during Trump's first term. So in a sense, it's not just about like, oh, winning MAGA people over to communism. It's about the fact that there's a revolutionary edge of MAGA and then there's a non-revolutionary edge of MAGA. And that has to be understood. And I read Hawes's post yesterday. I agree. I think DeSantis endorsing Trump is actually not a good sign, because what you're going to see, and you're already starting to see it, you're going to see all of like the DeSantis like culture war, but like no actual substantial policy people come back into the MAGA movement. You're going to see Ben Shapiro and fucking Charlie Kirk creep their way into the MAGA movement, and it's like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Like MAGA has this division, there's right-wing grifters that are trying to infiltrate MAGA, and then there's the real, genuine, as Haas has referred to it, the MAGA working class, people who are interested in Trump, not because, they agree with everything Donald Trump says, but because he represents a division within the American ruling class that's divergent from the two-party duopoly and the monopoly interest. And even though that's not inherently true in the regards of everything that Trump does policy-wise, because he has allowed people like John Bolton and others within his circles, we should be reaching out to the masses within MAGA that are aligned with Donald Trump for that reason, for the divergence of from the two-party duopoly and the institutions. So I think that's important, and I will also say it's not limited to MAGA as well. It also, there's a lot of people that are like in the Jimmy Dore crowd on the left that have this all the same or similar kind of revolutionary tendency. And what we should be doing is divorcing ourselves from the left-right paradigm pushed by the ruling class, that you're either in this camp or that camp. It is the bottom versus the top, not the left versus the right in that regard. And when we reach to the masses and we get them to understand that basis, they won't see China as the enemy anymore. They won't see Russia as the enemy. They won't see their fellow Americans necessarily as the enemy, but they will view the ruling class, people like Bill Gates and George Soros, as well as I guess the only remaining Koch brother, as the political enemy that we need to target non-violently, of course. So, with that all being said, I think a good place to kind of move to the next topic right here would be to focus on. We're asking, how do we get Americans, or how do we get a communist movement to recognize the American condition? And the second topic was the importance of embracing an entrepreneurial spirit in America. When you look at countries like China and the Soviet Union, while they do have their examples of how they lifted up individuals for the actions that they do, whether liberal culture overall, and in that context, you see a lot of American communists where they'll go against, small businesses, the petite bourgeoisie, as one might refer to them. But one of the things we have to understand is that the petite bourgeoisie in the United States has a lot of commonality with the American working class. So, what I think is important to emphasize uh, in America in particular is we're not here to crush your small business. We're not here to, uh, break apart your ability to provide for your family in whichever way that might be. What we are trying to do is break apart the multinational corporations, the banking institutions, the BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the financial investment firms. Our target is the ruling class. It's not the petite bourgeoisie. And if anything, under the American communism, it's fundamental to uplift small business owners and communities, uplift the entrepreneurial spirit in the regards of, you know, like even Deng Xiaoping said, to be rich is to be glorious. And we really do want to emphasize that we're not after the wealthy for being the sake against wealth. We're against those who happen to be extremely exorbitantly wealthy because they control the means of production. So if someone wanted to add into that, we have some hands raised. I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on that in that regard.
Yeah, TY, you had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit to unpack there. But first of all, I just wanted to say everyone who's spoken so far, they've chimed in with perfection. I mean, this is absolutely beautiful, the way that you guys are conducting this dialogue. And the reason why I'm saying it's beautiful is because it's it's one of those topics, isn't it? Red hat, MAGA this, communism that, racism this, and they end up throwing a billion different labels on it. And that's not what it's supposed to be. That's not that's not even what actually started off this movement. That's And I'll tell you what's not different between my Chinese friends and family and my American friends and family is that every hardworking person, be it American, be it Chinese, be it British, wherever they are in the world, they just want the governments of those countries to respect that hardworking people deserve things, okay? And they don't want an extra arm, an extra leg. They don't want a flipping Bentley in the driveway. No, that's not what the American dream is supposed to be. This is fictitious. This is complete and utter nonsense. And this is what's been sold. Okay. And it was sold with debt, believe it or not. All of this opulence, it's an idea that's been sold with debt. What you guys want is exactly what every other human being on earth wants. And that is a roof over your heads, right? You want a job. You want to be able to feed yourselves. You want to be able to put clothes on on your kids' backs. And at the same time, you don't want this for free. You are willing more than anything to earn this. You want to feel that sweat falling off your brow. That's what makes it beautiful. So when you think about the typical American 50 years ago, and you think about them now, what's the difference? What is the actual difference? I'll tell you what the difference is. The difference is that nowadays everyone's lied to. And it's, I used to always say before, we've been spoon fed BS, and we've been spoon fed hypocrisy, we've been spoon fed, you know, crazy ideologies. But I think it's worse. I think it goes well beyond that. I think we've been injected from a very young age. We've been poisoned with these ideals which are not good for us. They're abundantly not good for us. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say about China is this: when the Cultural Revolution happened, it had to happen. It was inevitable, right? Because of what was going on in the nation before. It was very tough. It was very difficult for people. However, the majority of the country, even though people didn't like it, they knew it was necessary. And this is why they wanted to support each other, and they wanted to support the government, okay? Because they saw it as a commonality. Everyone's the same, you know? I'm a Muslim, so we have a belief where, you know, oh man, God forgive me, because I'm not opposed to child piety or anything like that. But if my neighbor goes hungry, right, that means I've sinned. I've done something wrong. If I go to sleep with my belly full, but my neighbor hasn't, I'm wrong. I'm gonna get judged for that. You know, it goes down to the humanity of people. You don't expect anything for free. You want to work for it, right? But it's also about getting what's right and not being sold on a lie. And people nowadays, they're tired of the BS. In China, after the Cultural Revolution, do you know what happened? They saw opportunities. Where we in the outside world, we saw problems, right? They saw opportunities. Right now, another problem has occurred because of the way that we're looking at their nation. But guess what? They're not looking at it like that. When you're thinking about the population crisis that they're talking about, and when you're looking at the age crisis that they're talking about, how because there was a single child policy for so long in the majority of the land, now if you're a working couple, you've got, you know, 4 sets of parents to look after. So if that was us, and when we lacked that education, and we lacked that passion, we lacked that knowledge, and we lack the reasoning behind it, right? We're looking at it just like, oh, this is terrible. Oh, everything's going to collapse. Oh, it's going to be Armageddon. It's going to be anarchy on the streets. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. No, the Chinese government's not panicking about this, because they're thinking of this as another opportunity. And that's the difference between like most of the world, because every government looks at certain things in regards to like, what's the least I can do to keep the public happy, but you know, we can control them in a way where we're selling them this illusion of freedom. And I think,
Absolutely.
right?
Not to interrupt you, John, I might have to leave in a bit, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, thanks. I already pushed my first meeting because this conversation was just too interesting. But I do have to leave at the top of the hour. But I think that's a great point, Ty, just that you make in terms of looking at things. We need to look at the opportunities, right? Entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur really being someone that's idolized in American culture. A lot of times on the left, we'll hear people talk down about this. You know, it's a sign of our individualism, or that we're too obsessed with money or material things. But this is the reality, and I think that it's actually a great benefit, especially considering the current conditions. And why? It's because we're seeing unprecedented consolidation, right? If you look at any industry, but let's take healthcare, for example. The consolidation that we see throughout the states is mind-boggling. You have independent doctors and community health clinics that are being pushed into these huge systems, and that they don't want to be part of these systems, right? If you're an independent doc or community a health provider, you like your independence. You want to make they're making that almost impossible. And so when we're thinking about this, and we're thinking about this classification, the petite bourgeoisie, and I don't even know how much these classifications really are so I'm not sure how accurate they are in the current context, because it gets very fuzzy, right, in terms of ownership and how a contemporary economy actually functions. But when we're talking about these things like, your independent doctor or your lawyer or another profession that might be considered something along the lines of petit bourgeois, the eradication of the petit bourgeois as a class and the proletarianization of the American workforce in of itself creates the opportunity to have a revolutionary ideal attached to the spirit of entrepreneurship, right? We are founded on entrepreneurship as an American people. And I'm just giving an example now of what the line should be. We are founded, our identity is based in part on the spirit of entrepreneurship, on innovation. But that is dying. It's fading away. And why? It's because of the banksters. It's because of the large conglomerates that are suffocating our economy and our ability as people who work really hard and have ideas and want to innovate and want to create. It's making it impossible for those people to do just that. And I think that we have and the MAGA base is, I think, a combination of these working class folks and kind of petite bourgeois, where I think that there really is that opportunity to connect with folks with this line. And so we can't just be so hyper fixated on, what's the most oppressed class, because anyone who's actually read Lenin and understands Marx and Engels understands that it's not just the most oppressed class is not necessarily the revolutionary subject. The revolutionary subject is totally dependent on the time, the circumstances, and the material conditions of the present moment. And so we have to look honestly at things if we really want to bring about a revolutionary situation in America. And championing entrepreneurship should be part of that. And I think that's great.
100%. We need to 100% join the Belt and Road Initiative. America needs to have a land bridge between over the Bering Strait connecting Alaska and Russia, and we need to join OPEC. We need to
political
as the Chinese say, follow the party, start your business.
Yeah, just a quick housekeeping. Make sure to share the space, y'all. We're putting this together for your benefit. Yesterday was the 100th centenary marking the death of Vladimir Lenin, who died in January 21st, 1924. We got to keep his legacy alive, y'all. We have to hold the line. Share this space. Hold the line of the immortal science of Marxism-Leninism. Speaking of which, American Marxist-Leninist, you got your hand up, and then we can move on to the next topic.
Okay, so I wanted to go back to Yankee's point about the small business thing. And I think the issue of small businesses has way more significance than you might realize. So let me just say this. There was this account on Facebook, right? I'm getting friend requests on Facebook. There's this person who added me who's Charlotte Smith, she, her, lesbian, trans, whatever. But that's not the important part. The important part is, and there's a reason I mentioned this. The first post I see on their Facebook when they added me, I don't know why the fuck they added me, but they said, okay, I'm not sorry. I'm excited to see it getting harder for small businesses. I'm tired of local politics accommodating the wants and needs of local business owners. It's like you have, the reason I think it matters is because the majority of leftism in America, including so-called Marxism-Leninism, is really Trotskyism inspired. And I'm not just talking about like Marxism's like influence or whatever, because even groups that don't come out of that strand still have adopted that sort of methodology in politics anyways, right? You have this sort of inverse Trotskyist or worldism. That's what most Marxism-Leninism is. In America today, that of pioneered America today, that of pioneered by Sam Marcy. And the point is that the small business owners, fascism is a populist movement of the petty bourgeoisie. That's how Trotsky described fascism, right? So if you think fascism is a movement of the middle class, right, then of course you're going to think MAGA is fascist, because MAGA does kind of encompass that. But if you follow the Marxist-Leninist view, which is what I hope everyone here follows, that fascism is finance capital, then of course Trump is not the fascist. And if anything, by the Comintern's definition, Biden's way closer to fascism, right? So you have to understand that it all goes back to Dimitrov, not even Stalin, it's Dimitrov versus Trotsky. And the majority of so-called Marxist-Leninists in America follow Trotsky. They think that finance capital is the lesser evil compared to the petty bourgeoisie rising up. And they claim that Mussolini and Franco and Hitler were all just the middle class becoming angry. When clearly you can anyone who studies his history knows it's bullshit, and that Hitler was backed by the crown. But that's a whole separate conversation. And even if you look at today's Marxist-Leninist organizations, right? Workers' World, which, by the way, many years ago, I was a lot younger and I was a lot more dumb. I joined them for like 2 months, and I'm not even kidding. In their educational classes, the first thing they teach you is they claim to be Marxist-Leninists, right? But then they teach you Trotsky's fascism, what it is, and how to fight it. And they claim that Trotsky's definition of fascism was more correct than Dimitrov. And PSL does this too. PSL also holds this line. PSL doesn't formally consider themselves to be Trotskyists, but they still uphold Trotsky's view on fascism, which may be Trotsky's most important. That's even more important than permanent revolution. That may be Trotsky's the most defining feature of Trotskyism at this point. What you're seeing, and let me just wrap this up. What you're seeing in America today, when it comes to the whole small business thing, is representative of a larger trend. It's seeing you have Trotskyism as a whole, Orthodox Trotskyism, the traditional, that's dying, and that's boomers at this point. But Trotskyism is coming back in not in name, but in form. You understand what I'm saying? It's coming back in form. And you're not going to see Orthodox Trotskyism ever again. I'm telling you that right now, unless there's some weird internet LARPers that decide to do so. But what you will see, and you're already seeing it with groups like PSL, is this neo-Trotskyism that, and let me explain the difference. The Orthodox Trotskyism still claims to be sort of Leninist, right? But this sort of neo-Trotskyism that PSL is literally just leftist social democracy. That's what it is. PSL is just a left-wing social democracy. In Europe, every single Trotskyite group is literally the left-wing fraction or the left-wing association of groups like the Linke or the Labor Party, right? So Trotskyism, ever since the 60s, has just been the left wing of the labor movement and the left wing of the social democracy. And even within Teamsters, you have the TDU, right? And that's Trotskyist strand now, although it was once a CPUSA front. So my point is, and let me just finish. My point is, Trotskyism is everything is Trotskyism. That's just my point. Everything is Trotskyism. Anarchism is Trotskyism in America. Maoism, even so-called Stalinism. Look at the Communist Party of Greece. That's Trotskyism too.
Absolutely. Today's leftoids are tomorrow's neocon warmongers. Alex Jones put it best when he said, "That's the kind of folks. That's the kind of people we're dealing with. Hardcore Trotskyists."
It's the best, guys. I gotta jump. I'll come back if.
Can you hear me, guys? Can you hear me, guys? We are under attack. Sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. We are under attacks right now in Yemen, in Sana'a city. Of Sana'a. There is.
I definitely appreciate you giving us updates. However,
new updates from
this
Yemen
is not the space for this, my friends.
No, I want to hear this. Go ahead.
DM us the details. We'll make sure to kick up another space when this space is done. All right, my friend. You DM the hosts.
Okay.
And make sure to share the space, y'all, because it looks like we're gonna have to have another space when this panel is done. But Joey, you wanted to bring up a political program for the working class. That's actually the first post we have up in the Jumbotron if you want to scroll. But that image has been circulating on this accursed website for more than a year now. The MAGA Communism platform.
Yeah, I'll just briefly read out, some of the bullet points on the MAGA communist platform. So reindustrialization of America, dismantling of big tech, end foreign intervention, end globalist imperialism, abolishing the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA, drain the DOJ swamp, pardon those who are on January 6th, pardon Julian Assange and Snowden. We extend free speech to social media.
I didn't literally go through the whole list.
But it's a very large list, and I think that the thing that it needs to be emphasized is that we need a platform that recognizes the the conditions in the United States, both in the regard focusing on the culture war. When you go into communities, you should be recognizing what are the things that within that culture that need to be addressed in those communities, right? I think that's really fundamental if we're going to realistically be able to reach the masses, right? So, one of the big things I promote is an economic bill of rights. We absolutely need a economic bill of rights. Look, we don't have a national health care system. We don't have a federal jobs guarantee. We don't have, like guaranteed access to public education, which includes trades, by the way, which largely connects to us reestablishing a jobs corps, expanding it in a way that uh, that is not just limited to people ages 21 and younger. Like we need it for every American right now that is physically able to work. There's a lot of stuff right now in our country. It's collapsing. 300 cities in the United States right now do not have clean water. At least according to a 2019 statistic, right? I imagine it's worse now because, we can see, Flint, Michigan, they didn't get their water properly cleaned up. Palestine, Ohio, not to be confused with Palestine, has also, had a toxic chemical train derailment that was never properly cleaned up. Jackson, Mississippi also doesn't have proper clean water. A town that I was in called San Angelo, Texas. I lived there for about 6 months. They did not have clean water either, and it was a major water crisis in San Angelo. And the organization down there, San Angelo Solidarity, luckily was able to hand out bottled water. But that doesn't resolve the situation when people can't take showers without their skin being burned, right? So there's so many things materially in the regards of political policy that we should be pushing to address a lot of these situations. So if folks on this panel, if you have any perspective on this, please chime in. And there's a few hands raised, or what? Rather, there's a few hands raised as well. So, TY, I don't know if you raised your hand before American.
No, American was up before me.
Yeah.
Okay. That's American. If you could give your input, my friend.
Sure. So first, I have a joke. So about East Palestine, Ohio. They renamed East Palestine, Ohio to East Israel, Ohio. I wanted to point that out. So as far as an early neocons, there was a faction within like the Socialist Party USA or Socialist Party of America, whatever the hell it's called. And that was like more hawkish, right? Like you had Norman Thomas and like fucking Michael Harrington and stuff. So yes. So the Social Democrats and Trotskyists who became neocons, those people were probably the most successful neocons, probably the most successful Trotskyists ever, and the most successful Social Democrats in America. And what I mean is, if you look at Trotskyism's permanent revolution, right? People have a really like hoi for understanding of it, right? Like they think that permanent revolution is just when you invade all these other countries. No, permanent revolution means that revolution can only happen in the most developed countries possible, right? So Trotsky said, if a revolution, and this is back in the 20s, if revolution took place in the United States and in England, then naturally that would destroy capitalism for all the other countries because it would destroy the world economic system. And then naturally it would create revolution in the colonies and everywhere else, right? That was Trotsky's version. So coming from that perspective, right? So unless you're coming from that perspective, if you're a neocon, you want, and ironically, if anyone here knows who Jehu is, that's kind of what he advocates, if you really think about it. Just like Jehu, Trotsky wants full-scale, a Trotskyist, a successful Trotskyist would want full-scale American hegemony, right? They would want full spectrum American dominance. because then when there's a revolution in America, then it breaks down for the rest of the world, right? That's what a Trotskyist would view. So if you're a neocon, you can say, oh, we want America to be hawkish and we want America to have full spectrum dominance, because then when the revolution does occur, then it breaks capitalism for every other country, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. TY, you had something to say as well?
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. First of all, what you said about the water, it just completely solidifies my whole stance about my earlier comment, right? And just to change it up a little bit about what I mean is this. Do you really think in this day and age, Americans give a crap about 30 different types of flavored syrup that they can get in their coffee at Starbucks? Or do they care about the water that their kids are bathing in? Water that they're drinking that's making their children sick, that's giving them diseases, chronic illnesses? That's the first point. Second point is you only got to look at what's going on today and quite recently as well, when they've shipped off Elon Musk, you know. Now, you might think it's them that are controlling him, but you know what? It goes bigger than that, because in China, once you reach a certain level of influence and wealth, you have to naturally progress within government because you are seen as an influencer of society. Okay? So you only need to look at people like Jack Ma in terms of what he was doing with Alibaba. And it's not just like tech companies, right? It's literally every single facet of society in general. If someone becomes super successful in sports, they will do the same to them because they expect them to inspire people, to inspire the next generations, to inspire the youth. You know, this is what is achievable, and you achieve things for yourself to help everyone. It happens in acting. Fan Bingbing, she was once upon a time one of the most popular actresses in China. But what did she do? She drank a little bit too much of the Kool-Aid from the Western influence from outside of China, right? So what did she do? She started shipping money abroad. She wasn't promoting things in the right way. So what did they did? They controlled it. They said, no, you can't do that. That's not right. That's wrong. You're influencing the youth in an abhorrent way. So no, we're not going to allow it. Quite recently, something similar happened again. When I'm sure you guys know who Blackpink is. I went to their concert last year. They were dope, yo. That was one of the best live shows I've ever seen. However, they're also filth. Okay? So when it comes to Blackpink and the way that they end up influencing the youth, I kid you not, even I didn't know about the Crazy Horse before Lisa went there. All right? But just because Lisa went there doesn't mean that prominent figures who are in a position of influencing youth should have gone and promoting it on their own social medias, not just in Western countries, but they're also using social media in China as well. They were promoting it on Weixin, they were promoting it on their own personal Weibo accounts. And these are Chinese people, Chinese citizens who have become very prominent in the public eye. So what did China do? They blacklisted those Chinese superstars because it's immoral. You can't be influencing youth in a negative way that goes against the exact fabric of society that your whole nation is trying to build something positive. So those are the two things I wanted to say. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I'm seeing a lot of infrared gorillas in the audience right now. If you're not hopping up here on the mic to defend the legacy of American communism, then you better at least be sharing this space up and down x.com while Elon Musk is doing an apology tour in Auschwitz. We're not going to have the what little free speech we have for very long. You better make sure to share it if you aren't hopping up onto the mic. I got some of you DMing me right now. Find a way to make it work, or I will be hitting you up with some major criticisms from the people's deep state, from the Stalinist deep state, straight down from on high. But yes, we can keep moving. Thank you.
Absolutely.
It's been talking so far. Victor Vaughn, thank you for hopping on. Good to see you again.
Hey, how's it
Good to
going?
have you in the space, brother.
First time, second time speaker, long time fan.
Thoughts on short-term, long-term policy for MAGA communism? How we can dig down, make and make it relevant. Civic.
Yeah, I like a lot of those proposals or those policy points. I feel like there's specific, I guess, jurisdictions where they would take place are going to look kind of different. I mean, I think, in other words, I think we have a big enough country to where we can try different things, and see kind of what sticks. Different funding sources, and some little town says, "Hey, we don't have any of X, Y, and Z. An office related job, but it was adjacent to construction. It was dealing with construction. And all the people in the office tended not as much toward Trump, but all the people swinging hammers and, plumbers, electricians, roofers, they all went for Trump. And I think at that point I was, pretty like working class oriented, like, okay, I should pay attention to this because it is something. Um, and you can't simply say, oh, he just fooled all of them, he just lied. Yeah, he did in some ways, but he spoke to something that they knew in the back of their mind was real. My second kind of point, and I think this would kind of go dovetail with the specific policy proposals, would be in as much as any petty bourgeois is oriented, at least classically, against the working class. They're hiring people to run their diner or whatever, or they're working their jet ski dealership or whatever, what have you. They way more likely than not in America owe money to these giant financial firms in one way or another. Either their real estate or their very business has a loan on it. And so I think that would be something worth kind of keeping in mind as far as that goes, is that distinction between the Trotskyite notion of fascism and then the more correct one. That delineation, same thing goes for farmers and truckers. You can't tell me there's no farmers that owe, or there's even a majority of farmers that don't owe anything to any private debt organizations. Same thing goes for truckers. Very few truckers own their vehicles outright, right? So you can't even say, well, they own their means of production. That means they're the bad guys, and it just doesn't work in the modern era, I don't think. But yeah, the speaking more to the specific list, such as like dismantle big agriculture, that would require addressing both intellectual property as far as GMOs, and on the whole legal system behind all that nonsense. But no farmer wants to just douse their fields and Roundup and things. So I think a lot of these speak to what people know in their gut, but the implementation may be different depending on where you're applying this at specifically, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the regards of when you are organizing within specific regions or specific communities, the primary focus of political policy needs to be different, right? I mean, you're not going to go into a mostly suburban or urban community and try to be talking about farmer regulations and you know doing land reform in the regards of giving the properties of from BlackRock back to small farmers, right? But when you're in a rural area, you definitely want to prioritize stuff like that, right? So it really depends on what the community is that you're trying to organize, and I think that this would be a good transitional point to address our fourth topic, because one of the things that is common no matter what region of the country, and this is definitely the roundhouse of DD geopolitics, of course, is connecting the anti-imperialist struggle to the development of an American communism. Now, one of the things I've always said, and I'm sure some of you that may have gone to BLM rallies in the past have heard this slogan, which I still think is accurate. Those who bomb the Middle East are the same who oppress us on the streets. And, that was a solid attempt of at least some of the more revolutionary segments of BLM, even though a lot of them have sadly dissipated or been assassinated, which is a different conversation. Excuse me. But, I think these more revolutionary segments of BLM were doing the correct messaging in this regard. We need to connect what is going on abroad, whether it be in Gaza and Yemen or China and Taiwan, this is something Republicans up until recently were pushing a lot, and I'm sure they'll get right back to it, is pushing a war with Mexico. They say they're only going to fight drug cartels, but the facts are that the majority of people, as of a few days ago, in the state of Texas, are either of Hispanic or Latin American descent. So we're, it's important to link these struggles because they're inherently connected. The immigration crisis that we see on the border is due to American foreign policy in the regards of war and coups and destabilizing governments through the drug war, which is not really a war on drugs, but is truthfully a war on people, in the way that it is performed by the U.S. government. And is part of this anti-imperialist struggle in a lot of ways. So with that all being said, Sarah, I don't know if you're in the room, but at this exact time, you might be doing something. But if you're not and you're here, I would love to hear from you in the regards of how we can connect the anti-imperialist struggle to a struggle for American communism.
Yeah, I'm here. Well, I think that that's a very easy connection to be made. I think that it's just mostly educating people about getting over the ugly word of communism, because they hear communism and America and they freak out. So I connecting working classes, I'm always telling people, like, board. We ran into a lot of this, and even explaining like actual history to these people. We ran into a lot of this with the Russian war, because people were like, look, it's Russian imperialism. And people are very much under the impression that imperialism kind of just means walking into someone else's house or something like that. So I think that educating people about why Donetsk is actually a working class struggle. It's a region of mining that has been under assault by the Ukraine, because that's where their bread and butter comes from. Ukraine doesn't make money anywhere else besides the Donbass. Same thing with Gaza. Gaza, it's not to oversimplify it, so forgive me, but it is also a working class struggle. They use basically indentured servants in Israel. And they oppress the people of Gaza for various monetary reasons. They use them as guinea pigs. They use them for weapons testing. They use people in the West Bank for all kinds of things. So, that's also a working class struggle. So, we really need to drill down with people that every war, every front, it's all class war. People forget that they don't think of themselves as working class, because they think working class is yuck. But there has to be some working class solidarity, 100%. I think we need a vanguard, and I think that we need to be really pushing this vanguard. Like, I see Jesus Motorcycle is in here, and he does a really great job of kind of taking Haz's greatest talking points and making them into these amazing, easily digestible videos, and it's stuff like that. It's like getting Haas out into the forefront more often, getting Samira well, let's soften Samira's image a little bit, but getting Samira like front and center, getting Syrian girl front and center. You need these voices from all different regions of the world that understand things as a working class struggle. We have people in China. TY can hook us up with people in China. We have Mike in China, who's a communist who lives in Shanghai. Like, we can connect with all of these people, and that's kind of what we're looking forward to, of multipolarity. But I think by making people meet and greet and get to know working class people in other areas of the world will help them become more accepting of at least the socialist movements in America, because it's like a meme now. They're about to find out why America doesn't have health care, and it's like, that's not funny. You know what I mean? So it's like, we've got to talk to like the people that were bombing that are like, wait, I have health care. We're like, but we don't have any, so stuff like that. So I actually think spaces are great, and structured spaces like these are amazing. That keep on like a steady kind of itinerary and allow for free discussion. I also want to kind of ask you guys, maybe if you could take a second to explain the MAGA part, because I think that's a big hang up for a lot of our leftists in the United States, is the Trump aspect of MAGA communism. I know it as just make America great again. So I'm like, yeah, because I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not an anybody supporter I don't care about United States politics, because I want to tear it all down. So, but can you kind of can we just say, discuss the MAGA part of the MAGA communism? Because I think people kind of get weirded out by that.
Yeah.
One time they were like, are you part of that MAGA communism? I was like, I wish I was. And they were like, well, I was like, what is MAGA communism? He's like, they're all these retards who think that Trump's our savior. I'm like, that's not what, nobody's our savior. Like, we are the savior. So yeah, maybe if you could explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, I put a video from Jesus Motorcycle up in the Jumbotron. Jesus Motorcycle doesn't have enough followers. Everybody go follow that guy. He puts in a lot of work. But yeah, there's a lot of university educated liberal consensus from these Starbucks latte drinking effete urbanites, these scum sucking. As I'm going on a tangent here. People call MAGA a cult, but all Trump did was give popular sentiment and give a language to the people who are blue collar America. I'm talking about truck drivers. I'm talking about people who work in energy, people who work in construction, farmers. I'm talking about like the salt of the earth type people who are putting food on your table. Gave a language to them for why they feel as bad as they do. For who is the person who is sucking up all the value of their work day in and day out through debt. Who is making it so that everything that their parents worked for to pass down to them has been shrinking smaller and smaller and smaller, that their birthright is being evaporated before their eyes. That's all Trump did. And that's why they respect him so much, is because no other person in US politics has opened their eyes to this fact. He has showed them what US hegemony is, and liberals will never forgive him for that. Liberals will punish him until the day he dies for that fact. And they will punish MAGA for having a new language to point out what fake news is, to point out what globalism is, to point out what the deep state is. These are real phenomena. It might not be as scientific as we who are, university educated and all this. It might not be as scientific as we would like it, but they are 100% in the right direction, far more in the right direction than these Black Lives Matter liberals who are saying it's because of these MAGA people are so racist. If they just changed the ideas in their head, then we would be in this social utopia. That's not where development comes from. If you want America to get out of this cycle of warfare, then you're going to have to reach out to some people. Yeah, they might be racist. Yeah, they might be misogynistic. Hell, I'm 100% an avowed sexist. But you're going to have to, like, this is like the conflicts that you need to unite a genuine working class party to take political power away from bankers. Like, bankers don't like each other. Neo-Nazis don't like each other. The forces of forces conspiring against like the common man in America, they hate each other's guts, but they are disciplined enough to put their differences aside and work towards a common goal. I mean, neo-Nazis not so much. They stab each other in bar fights all the time, and let them do that. That's a very flash in the pan movement. But liberal, like bankers and Wall Street types, they have nothing. They have nothing that they agree with. They hate each other, but they're willing to put their differences aside in order to screw you over. And so, MAGA, Make America Great Again, acknowledging that these problems are real, that they're institutional, that our ability to feed ourselves and pass our legacy down to our children is under threat by these types.
And to be clear, it's not like we are, saying that Donald Trump is any type of savior, right? Not just are we, acknowledging the reason why a lot of folks in MAGA have circled the wagons in favor of Donald Trump, right? It's also from like we critique Donald Trump, and these are things that even MAGA does, right? For example, Operation Warp Speed. I'm vehemently against that policy, and I think a lot of us are.
And most
For the
MAGA
most
people
part.
are.
Yeah,
100%.
most MAGA people are, and so like these people are not a cult. These people are
The Democrats are the cult.
Yes.
Like, you want to see people falling in line behind, like, and trusting the government implicitly to push their message, to act as the strong man, to push a political message on the entire population. You look at the goddamn Democrats. And I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, Joey. It's just like, the reason we're here, if you actually are criticizing Trump, hell yeah, I criticize Trump. But the reason there hasn't been someone better than Trump coming along is because y'all liberals, y'all leftists, y'all soft ass liberals would rather attack the people putting food on your table than aiming all of your ire at Wall Street. You haven't produced anyone better. So where do you get the gall to criticize? We're here because of you. Because you would rather shut down political conversation and make a coalition with people who, might disagree with you, who might be gruff, might rough around the edges. But you know what? They've done a lot more than you ever have. MAGA is not a cult. Like, being working class is not a cult. It is being the total representation of a population. It means representing a nation in its entirety. It means they are the ones who are physically building this country, building the foundation that we walk on now. There's going to be a lot of contradictions within that population. It's going to be really contradictory and schizophrenic, but it's real. And it's pulling everyone forward. That's not a cult. That is history. That you are letting walk past you. You are holding that back. You are attacking it because you're too lazy or too stupid or too malicious to stand in front of it and lead. I'll stop interrupting people.
You're fine. I mean, you're absolutely right. The left, the best that we got from the left, the supposed left in the United States, was Bernie Sanders. And we can look, what is Bernie Sanders doing? He has supported Israel over and over and over again throughout his political history, right? There has been no real leaders coming from the left, in my view, not since the 1930s and 1940s, when the CPUSA was under a coalition with FDR, right? With the Socialist Party and the labor movement. There was a real political coalition that existed back in those days. That coalition doesn't exist anymore, right? We have to build a new coalition, a coalition between, you know, some good, genuinely good anti-imperialist libertarians, with communists like the MAGA communists that we are, the Jimmy Dore progressives, and the MAGA working class, and anyone else that is willing to put the differences aside in the regards of the culture war, to focus on the bankers, to focus on the global imperialist elites that control Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock. We need to fight those people, you know? And look, one of the key things, and this is something that Sarah has always pointed out, is the people who support, don't support Iran, that don't support China, at least in regards to social media, that don't support, you know, the multipolar world as a whole. Those people are the ones that are, you know, the tools. If they're not feds themselves, they are the tools of feds, working and operating specifically to dismantle any real coalition. They are the 21st century's version breakers. And in that context, you know, I think that us having this conversation today, and really, you know, seeing what is necessary in our time to build a political movement and a genuine anti-imperialist political movement. We're doing that work right now. The conversation, I think, is, and this is something, Ture, you mentioned that we should at least bring up in the context of our conversation today, is as much as the online political movement and the information war that we're fighting, how important it is. We are seeing censorship. We are seeing people getting kicked off of X. We've seen people kicked off of YouTube, Twitch. You know, we see people getting kicked off of all these platforms. And we are now approaching the time where we need to be mobilizing ourselves in our own communities. So I think one of the big questions is how we transition what we've been building here in the regards of building an IRL political movement that can actually bring the message to the masses so the masses can organize themselves. Because that is really what it gets down at the end of the day. We, while are doing our best to lead the movement itself must develop and follow through of what we're pushing to mobilize themselves, right? We're never going to necessarily see, you know, none of us are Lenin, is my point. You know, the Lenin will come from the masses. So we need to figure out what that next step is so the Lenin can come from the masses.
The Lenin is like that's, I mean, not to put not to put so brisk an answer on it, but I've never met anyone more erudite in answering the problems of the modern day, and someone who's like literally like, there's a reason Jackson Hinkle is in Beijing right now talking with the largest news aggregator in Chinese media. It's because Jackson is the best practitioner of these theories that have been best put forward by Haas. That's just an observable fact from Jackson Hinkle's success. It's from the theory. I mean, as Haas has said, like, everything that Jackson believes is everything that Haas believes. They are united in that. Like, if there's, like, yeah, and he's coming out with a book now that as soon as he does, that's going to be like, I'm going to take the day off from work. I'm going to tell them I have the flu, and then I'm just going to get that book and read it. But yeah, just, yeah.
I will warn you, it probably will not be digestible within one day. That man's thoughts over the span of his whole life, bring his whole perspective of history from his own eyes. He has already said it's going to be a very big book. So come in with the expectation that you'll be reading and digesting what you read with that book probably for months. But
And I would imagine it would take multiple reads too. You got to get to the end before you understand the beginning type thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an important read. Well, one of the things that Haas has already said is that at this time we should be going out into our communities to not necessarily form the organization, but to build those social networks necessary to build an organization in our own communities, right? And I think that is like the we are at that stage now that we need to start having those conversations. How are we going to reach out to our communities that we live in? And obviously, I'm not asking anyone to dox themselves by any stretch of the imagination, but in that context, what do you guys think? What can you do in your own community? Ty, I see you have your hand raised. If you'd like to maybe speak on that or anything else you might have.
Yeah, no, the thing that I was going to say is actually kind of like it in a nice way ties into what you're actually asking the room, what you're asking everyone. Best. Okay, so I think what we need to first of all do is we need to re-educate ourselves on what communism actually is, and we also need to see it's actually socialism at its core. Okay, because things like healthcare, things like making sure everyone around you is cool and happy and they're going to be fine, and making sure that there's jobs, making sure that there's industry, making sure that there's food, making sure that there's good infrastructure. All of this is paramount to the future of any country, let alone the United States of America, right? Because what you lot are seeing right now is what Britain experienced maybe 20, 30 years ago. There are certain parallels there. We had a very proud and very famous, actually, very world famous manufacturing industry in terms of the way that we used to build our cars and other things as well. Where is it now? It's dead. It's gone. It's no more. And I know for a fact I've got some family who have actually worked in Detroit, some extended family on my dad's side. And they used to work in some of the car places, etc., etc. And obviously, it's not the same, man. It's not what it used to be. Yeah, it's a very proud industry, and people who have worked in that industry, they're very proud people, because why wouldn't they be? But those are the kinds of jobs that are disappearing because of the way the governments are running things, the way that they're not looking after the people. So I think at a grassroots level, you guys really need to start re-educating yourselves so that you can inform your children and your grandchildren and who knows who else, about why the country got to this level in the first place. That's the first thing. It's about re-educating yourselves as well. Don't be afraid of communism. Understand what it is. Understand why it was brought about. Understand why socialism is important. Why it's about humanity at the end of the day. I think that's basically at its core. Everyone needs to stop being afraid, basically, of these labels that they've thrown out there. Oh, you're a commie. Come on, man. Really? We're going to go into Reaganism? Seriously? How long ago was that? What's happened since then? What's America actually gained apart from debt? Can anyone in this space actually afford to buy a house in cash right now? How long would it take you? Why? What do you have to actually do in order to buy a house? Ask yourself these questions, and then start asking your politicians these questions. I'm not saying you need to literally, take the pitchforks and go on a revolt. Doesn't necessarily have to be like that. It starts with simple dialogue. It starts with conversation. Don't be afraid to have these talks with people. It's true they do like to pull people down, but be the bigger person. Speak to them, understand them, and then if they're wrong, inform them about why they're wrong and do it constructively, because you know what? Ignorance is one of those things, yo. Like sometimes people just don't know until they know. And when they do know, that's another person who can then spread the message on your behalf when you're not there.
And specifically, when we say speak to your community, speak to people, we mean actually go down on their level. Don't shame people for not meeting you where you're at. You meet them where they are at. That is what educators do. Like, can you and maybe that's just how far the American education system has fallen, is that that's just what, public school teachers and university professors and all, maybe that's just what they are now, is that just, these elite priests guarding the sacred knowledge from the illiterate and unwashed masses, and beating you for not correctly subscribing to the dogma of the ancient texts. You can't be that. Like whatever it is that your concerns are in your community, go and start talking to people about it. Do it now, because a crisis is a global crisis is coming. The Great Reset is going to happen whether we want it to or not. It's just a matter of when that dark night of civilization occurs, is if we can make it to the other side, holding the levers of power to take back control of our country. And that's not going to happen if you're not building the kind of bridges that, people who make everything, with, if you're not building bridges with them, rather than shaming them.
Absolutely. I think that with that all being said, I think we're ready to enter the Q&A portion of our space. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to request to speak. And anyone else that's on the panel, please ask questions. We want to know what your opinions are, what questions you have about an American communism or MAGA communism, or really anything else that we spoke about today.
I got a question. You all mean to tell me that I have more in common with some random working schmuck on the other side of the world than I do with Jeff Bezos, who is clearly similar to me, not at all a lizard person? Thank you.
Yes, you definitely have more in common with the working folks out in Iran and China and Russia than you will ever have in common with someone like Jeff Bezos. Just like you will always have more in common with the small business owner than you ever will have with someone like Jeff Bezos. Yes. I know that was a satirical question, but
I would controversial. You have very little in common with someone on the other side of the world. The civilians living and living and working, in China or in the Middle East. You have very little in common with them, like culturally, historically, morally, epistemologically, whatever. You have very little in common. And that's okay, because the one thing you do have in common is the most important thing you have in common, is that you have the right and the responsibility of the dignity of developing where you come from, the place you live and work and die in as you see fit. Like, that's what makes human history, is those people, those random schmucks who, through the sweat of their brow, are taking these materials in nature and making them useful for society so that human beings can continue into perpetuity. You have that in common with them. And that's the most important thing. Everything else is a distraction. The culture
Thanks
war,
for the answers, y'all.
civilization, it's a distraction from that.
I've got a
absolutely.
follow-up question. So if I were, let's say, if I were the class enemy of, a different class, probably the best place to hide would be amongst my class enemies, and then I would convince them to hate people of their class based on sort of outside mitigating factors such as geolocation and that kind of thing. Wouldn't you say that'd be true? Is the smartest, most strategically minded enemy would be the enemy that doesn't hide around on the other side of the world, but rather hides up in the echelons of power and whose names we've scarcely heard of. Would you say that that's a correct characterization within this premise of class war?
I do apologize. I was adding a speaker, so I missed the first half of your question. If you could repeat
Yeah,
it.
let me.
Apologize.
Yeah, I'll rephrase and clean it up a little bit. So whereas I would then try to get them to hate or otherwise fear people of their same class based on externalities such as geographic location and things like that. So, do you agree that keeping your enemies closer can be a useful tactic in this class war?
I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, if you are in a position like, for example, someone like Jackson Hinkle, right? He has some sort of relationship with Elon Musk because he's able to like get Elon to, put people back on X, people that frankly don't really like Jackson anyhow and aren't appreciative towards it. But still he's being consistent in that regard. So it's useful in the regards of like, the anti-imperialist struggle to, get people that are, in support of Palestine back. I think there are circumstances like that. I think it really depends on the amount of like political leverage that you have. Like, I don't expect folks in this space to be sitting here defending Elon Musk, for example, who is a class enemy. I do not. But you know, if you're the right person with the right position of influence, sometimes under those circumstances, you can understand why Jackson might have been a little bit softer on Elon initially. So when he did have the political influence, he could utilize it. So context matters in that regard. So I guess that answers my question. TY, you have a question, my friend.
Yeah, kind of like ties into what you just said. I mean, if you look at Nick Fuentes, right? Maybe you can see how his stance was a little bit more, trying to word it right, raw. I think raw is a pretty good way of saying it, right? His stance was way more raw. The way he was communicating his stance was definitely more raw. And I think that's why for Elon, he wasn't able to basically platform him or allow him to even have any kind of a platform. It made it easier for everyone else to put that kind of pressure on Elon in order to get him off the platform and off other platforms as well. So definitely the way that you approach it, I do think it plays a little bit of a part, which is kind of sad because it shouldn't. At the end of the day, if there truly is free speech, you should be able to say whatever you want, right? Doesn't matter other people have to believe it or not, but you should be well within your right to speak your mind, right? But at the same time, free speech doesn't mean that everyone has to bloody agree with you, and this is where it comes back down to that slippery slope syndrome when you keep allowing people too much, when you keep making liberties for people. You're not supposed to be there making liberties for people. They're not supposed to be taking liberties, right? Not at your expense and not at anyone else's expense. They're free to do or say whatever they want to say, but within reason, yo. Because if you look at what's going on right now with a billion different types of movements, who are they actually benefiting? Even the people that think that is benefiting them, it's not. It's a detriment to them. So yeah, it's just an interesting way to look at it. Do I think you need to hate your enemies?
I'll say the reason that Elon Musk kicked off Nick Fuentes, Lucas Gage, and all them is because liberalism will always disassociate its Nazi elements, its neo-Nazi elements, which is why it has neo-Nazis fighting over in Ukraine. It literally export like neo-Nazis from the United States to fight in Ukraine, like that one guy with the bone-faced McClellan, a U.S. citizen who the CIA shipped over to Ukraine to fight as a mercenary there. Like liberalism and the liberal ruling class like Elon Musk will dissociate these Nazi elements to fight their battles for them, so that they can actually like see themselves as the better option. Nick Fuentes and Lucas Gage are neo-Nazis. That is why they are off of X, not because Elon Musk actually champions free speech, just because he can't let the neo-Nazi element say the quiet part out loud, which is that it's just this ultimate like degenerate supremacy of finance capital over human life. Like Nick Fuentes and Lucas Gage don't actually like or want a working class America. Nick Fuentes has said he hates poor people. I really don't care whether or not they have a platform. It's because when a crisis happens in the United States and they get closer to power, they'll just use it to recreate the same institutions that we have now. They just want a more purely white capitalism and not a global multicultural capitalism. They want white banks and not internationally recognized banks. So I really don't care about them. Patrick, you came on as a speaker. Did you have a question? And then we
is to basically address property rights in terms of communism and Marxism and socialism. Because I've seen, a lot of times the thought leaders come on various public fora like Jackson and Haas, and they seem to blow off the property rights question. And I don't personally, my reading of Marxism is that property rights and socialism are not mutually exclusive at all. So that's been my reading of it. And in America, they've been led to believe that you have no property rights under communism. My reading is Marxism is all about property rights. And you can distinguish, I think the distinguishing thing that needs to be made is distinguishing between the property rights of the common man. For example, my fifth of an acre of land here in Florida, or my guns, and the property rights of monopolists like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. Because by monopolizing property, having 4 houses or 20 houses or 1,000 units, if you're a private equity firm, by monopolizing that property, they're actually infringing on the property rights of the common man. So I think that that's something that in America, because of the deeply ingrained cultural tradition of focus on property rights, that's something that I think should be addressed more, and a lot of thought needs to be put into that. Because my look at in China, they have property rights.
I mean, I get what you're trying to say.
So that needs to be addressed.
In part 8 of volume 1 of Capital, Marx lays out that there is 2 types of private property. There is the private property of the average Joe, which I guess would be more, you could call it personal property. It's still like yours by rights, because it's like it's what you're using to live, and it's your house, the tools you need to farm your land, whatever it is. Like that's that private property. And then the ultimate form of private property under capitalism, which is the monopoly private property. It is property that belongs to monopolists, where everything done on top of this, or done with this private property, with someone else's machines, with someone else on someone else's land, but 100% of that belongs to them by rights. And that is that sort of parasitic relationship, this creation of that parasitic system by pushing small-time workers like off of their lands and into these landless, factories and into the cities where they rent apartments. Like that system is reproduced and protected by this sort of like legal mumbo jumbo by saying that, oh, you need a piece of paper to validate like your property rights. Like, yeah, if you want to defend property rights, like,
Well,
that's fine.
if you
But like, that's done in action by challenging the authority of these asset managers like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. That's done by then, once you topple those regimes by taking back, this sort of, I guess in the future, like land distribution of those, of that private, like Bill Gates owned farmland, whatever you want to do. But like, first you need to like topple that regime of private bank ownership. I mean, I don't know what other means of like defending property
you have
you're
you have to have
unless
you have to have protection in order to have property rights for the common man. Then the common man's property has to be protected even from the state, otherwise there are no property rights. And that doesn't mean protecting Bill Gates's property from the state, but that means or from the proletariat, I should say, or the dictatorship of the proletariat. It means, but you have to have ingrained in the system, even the state cannot take my little piece of shit house in Florida from me. So that's,
I mean, that's kind of a moot point, because the state is the only thing validating any, like, that can and that can authorize your right as a citizen. Like,
there they can protect that right too. That's what I'm saying. Protections for the state protecting the common man's property.
That's a contradiction of terms. And you can't legislate, like the state can't legislate, like the state cannot intervene and then expect them to not.
Sure they can. It can be put in a constitution, and then it can't be. That constitutional rule can't be broken.
Okay, silence, anarchist. You're talking about a piece of paper that, again, it's not imbued with these magical properties. It's you write it on a constitution, and it's not suddenly like this magic spell that casts, its influence over the population. It's enforced and enforceable by a state through its executive arm in the military, keeping together national cohesion, enforcing legislation, ensuring that deviant elements in the population aren't going against those rules. No, it's through physical, organized execution of the law, and not through creating a piece of paper. So you want to enforce property rights, then go and take state power. Thank you. Next question. Lauren, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to say that, with the whole thing about property rights and patent rights, this actually law attains to what Cenk Uygur said in national news, that, Netanyahu went to a forum and declared that he has property rights over the Gaza Strip, as well as the West Bank, parts of Lebanon, and into the Syria Peninsula. And he said river to the sea. He said it multiple times. And yet again, he's criticizing his own legislation, his own government, and criticizing the United States for not giving him the legal authority. Illegal settlement silence him from our United States, because on both sides nobody's doing shit.
Good point, where it's essentially the same letter of the law, just enforced by his own genocidal state, where it would be the same it would be the same principle in action when Palestine is actually under the authority of an organic Palestinian one state solution under the Palestinians. Long live the resistance. Anyway, I digress. It would be the same principle in action of enforcing that letter of the law through state organized authority by force. There are no such thing as universal human rights. There are only those regional rights which can be written and enforced by a government. And Lauren, I know your thumb's downing, but that's a pill you have to swallow. There's no such thing as human rights. There's the rights which, because again, human rights for people in the West is different for what human rights is in West Asia, and that's fine because they're a different population than us. They have different values than us. They have a different history. They have a completely different way of understanding the world. But when they have a popular government which organically represents them and not a genocidal military dictatorship sitting on top of them, they will actually be able to develop a state which reflects them and reflects their values and can ensure their regional development. So, and this language of universal human rights actually stifles that development because it means that they have to match while they're developing. Again, Gaza is being bombed into smithereens right now, and enforce and just allowing like these universal human rights NGOs and bleeding heart humanitarians to come in and say, all right, we're going to give you the resources now to rebuild, but only if you follow our version of human rights. That defeats the purpose. That's also imperialism. That's just imperialism with a rainbow flag on it. So there's no such thing as human rights. Only those rights which a state can enforce, like can defend by force. And when that state is like representative of the Palestinian people, for example, that's not a bad thing. I know the anarchist Patrick is thumbs downing.
I mean, I can answer you. I can tell you.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. I respect that.
I'm. It's not a discussion. I'm correct.
No, you're not.
But okay, gonna.
I just wanted you to say that somebody on my TikTok, most of my followers, if you're not pro-Palestine, I will block you. And somebody wrote in somebody that I'm following that I actually went onto his live. He's Palestinian, born in Palestine, 100% pure blood Palestinian. He said that for his ticket, instead of writing in Democrat this year or liberal, he's going to write in Free Palestine on his voting ballot for the first time in his life. He's like, unfortunately, it won't win the election ballot, but it's a step in the right direction to write River to the Sea, Free Palestine. And that can actually get the underdog, the independent, like Jill Stein, who's actually pushing against pushing against Palestine and a ceasefire and to push legislation into a new form of government, which could be a potential democracy. So that's what he was saying. And he said if everybody did the same thing, which unfortunately it won't because we have APAC groups, violating our constitutional rights, fucking up our government, destroying our freedom of speech, will probably silence him as a Palestinian American. Just a question.
Apologies. You're saying there was a question? Can you shorten it?
The question was, if we did what we could to get back at APAC groups, because you mentioned it in the last thing you were talking about, and how APAC is basically fucking up our entire legislation system with, our freedom of speech and our ability to make Congress push legislation and do stuff like ceasefire and things like that, and to stop with. Yeah.
Okay. So the way that you get back at these lobbies, which represent interests that are not American, like all these lobbies in some way represent foreign interests, whether it be the Jewish lobby or the Zionist lobbies. Sorry, I misspoke. Whether it's the Zionist lobby that represents Israel or, whatever lobby it is, that's going to represent finance capital. It's going to represent international globalist banks. That's the same in Israel as it is with any other lobby. And the way that you get back at them is that you be the loudest champion for these resistance movements. I was talking about this yesterday on a space. You champion those resistance movements and you pray for their victory, and you don't stand in their way when they are pushing back against these forces, whether they be Zionism, in Palestine, or it's the same struggle against international banks in Venezuela when they're when Maduro says we're going to take back this contested Essequibo region from Guyana because Guyana is owned by ExxonMobil, is owned by the international oil bankers who have control of the entire Guinean government. It's you push back against those who defend like the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, because there's a Ukrainian lobby and there's an ExxonMobil lobby. The Zionist lobby is just the loudest of lobbies. It's not necessarily the most powerful, but it is the loudest. So the way you get back at these Zionist lobbies is by championing those resistance movements in Palestine. Because when they defeat Israel and overturn that military dictatorship that they call a country, then there will be no reason for existence for a Zionist lobby. You speed up the process of them, of Palestinians taking control of their land. And then the Zionists have no subject to lobby for.
Hope that happens in 2024.
Absolutely. It's already happening in Ukraine. Like the demise of Ukraine is in sight now. And it's not necessarily in sight for Israel right now, but the resistance is winning. They are dedicated to protracted struggle, which just means struggle that takes place over a long time. They are dedicated to it. The resistance movement in Yemen is dedicated to it. The IRGC in Iran is dedicated to it. They're all on the same side. So we might not be able to see it right now, but if we help that resistance movement along by saying to our government, no, we will not allow you to bomb them. We will not allow you to send these NGOs to start fake protests in their cities to burn stuff down and have a Maidan revolution coup like the U.S. government did in Ukraine. We will not allow you to do this. We retract our consent of building these, of privatizing all of their land and using it to make these dystopian, feudal, backwards enslavement countries. Yeah, I mean, so it's not the satisfying answer, but that is materially what will make the. We need to trust in the development of a multipolar world. We need to trust in the development of other spheres of influence in the world that will take away U.S. supremacy, of U.S. global and U.S. global supremacy.
Absolutely. I mean, Mao Zedong has written, Tiger, and in that context of the American imperialist system, it is fundamental for us to support the struggle in Palestine. It is fundamental for us to support Iran, China, Russia, Venezuela. These countries are fighting the same exact battle and cause as us here at home. And it goes right back down to that slogan that, used to be chanted on the streets during the BLM protests. Those who bomb the Middle East are the same who oppress us on the streets. So, that's why I'm so strong in the regards of, fighting the information war against these schmucks that go online and they attack Assad and they attack Xi Jinping and they attack Vladimir Putin and they attack the resistance movement. They attack the Houthis, say that bullshit about that they're anti-Semitic or whatever. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen the Barracks post with his interview,
I was just about to put it in the jumbotron. Yeah, you read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had interviewed one of the spokesmen for Ansar Allah. His name is Muhammad Al Bukaiti. You should follow him on Twitter. He's a really good spokesman. He tweets in Arabic and English. So, but yeah, I interviewed the guy. I reached out to him for some questions, and yeah, he talks about a similar thing as to what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Rasul, I saw you in the space earlier. You requested to speak. I'd love for you to give your input if you have any questions or anything.
What's up, guys? I was just curious. How do you see the end game? Like, 3 years, it will collapse, finished. But what is the scenario of what do you guys see? How the Middle East gets resolved, and that's pretty much it. My question.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is that there might be a temporary ceasefire, theoretically. It's very unlikely, okay? I'm just putting that out there. That I don't think the Zionist entity is going to go along with this idea of a permanent ceasefire, and they're very unlikely to even do a temporary ceasefire. But the internal contradictions of the Zionist entity, as well as the external contradictions, they're mounting. We're reaching at a capacity that, well, I can't guarantee it's going to happen like instantaneously or whatever. We are going to see the Zionist entity collapse. It's more of a question of when, not if. Now, in that regard, I can't tell you if it's going to just be the resistance movement, or maybe there'll be a temporary ceasefire, at least in Gaza, while they're fighting Hezbollah in southern Lebanon or whatever. Theoretically, because here's the thing: Benjamin Netanyahu, he's in the position that it was already chaos before October 7th, right? Like, everyone in the population wants Netanyahu out, right? So he's trying to maintain his political grasp of power. So October 7th, whether we want to say that, it was an effective military victory by Hamas or whatever, or it was partially allowed by the Zionist entity, either way, it was convenient. It was politically convenient for the Netanyahu government. But it doesn't mean those contradictions don't exist. So even if there would be a ceasefire in the regards of Gaza, I see a continued escalation in the regards of Hezbollah, or rather, even there's a ceasefire of Hamas, there would be a continued escalation in regards of Hezbollah. And in that context, Benjamin Netanyahu is going to try to keep this war going on one way or another. So, are they going to collapse because of Hezbollah in combination or without in the regards of Hamas, as well as possibly Yemen and what they're doing in the Red Sea? Who knows? But the internal contradictions, if the external contradictions don't cause the collapse of the Zionist entity, the internal contradictions will. I do not believe that there is a quote-unquote liberal or moderate replacement for the Benjamin Netanyahu government. Every faction within the Zionist entity is literally more radical than Benjamin Netanyahu. That, by the way, are part of his current coalition, by the way.
But that's not entirely true. Just to give some clarification on what the designs of Washington are, what they've been trying to manufacture in Israel. There is a growing, quote unquote, moderate Zionist wing, like what they call moderate. Just what is a moderate genocide? But that's what they're calling it. Under the potential leadership of Knesset members like Benny Gantz, and the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, is also starting to split with Netanyahu's right wing, criticizing him out like in meetings and in the open. Gadi Eisenkot is another one who is joining the sort of quote unquote moderate coalition. And, you see it in the New York Times. The New York Times is, every time they talk about Palestine, they're talking about like Israel's going too hard on their genocide. They need to slow up the pace of the genocide. There's too many deaths. And that's what the Biden regime wants for the Israeli government. That's what's underway now. As you said, Joey, there is that split in the Zionist state between a supposed left wing and a crazy apocalyptic right wing.
I don't think that the left wing, without foreign investment from, or intervention rather, from the United States, has any real legitimate way to obtain political power. So that's more or less what I'm pointing out. But if the U.S. were to, basically do a color revolution in the Zionist entity, which is, by the way, is just kind of a crazy concept considering it's supposedly one of our biggest political allies in the Middle East, right? But I do think that that would be realistically the only way this faction within the Zionist entity could obtain political power. But that's my perspective on that.
Yeah, it's definitely happening. So, and it's just, I'm in agreement with you that the internal contradictions in the Zionist entity will be its downfall. But we still need to, that doesn't mean it's happened yet. So we do need to prepare for the, possibility that, maybe Netanyahu gets ousted and replaced with someone that American audiences find palatable, like Benny Gantz, as I said. He's the name that's been pushed around a lot. So it's just what will happen. Like the possibility that we're hoping for and that we're working towards is a complete collapse of the Zionist entity where the left and right wing cannot consolidate their differences, which would happen if Netanyahu continues to escalate the war, if he's pulling troops out of Gaza to mobilize on the north against Hezbollah, and the axis of resistance in the region says like, oh, bet we're just going to steamroll
using nukes would be an would totally wipe out that investment. Using nukes would mean that all of those $100 billion would be gone. And so I believe that Haas is right in that these these financiers, the finance cartels, will at the 11th hour choose to preserve. If it looks like they're losing, they will choose to preserve what assets they have left, flee the Levant, and go back to Miami, Florida, and New York. Like that. I mean, is that guaranteed? No. But I think that's more likely because you have to also understand that that nuclear warheads have only been used once in history, and they were used against Japan to force Japan to surrender to the United States because they were about to surrender to the Soviets. That was the historical context that nukes have only ever been used, was to force a power to surrender to the United States. And it doesn't really make sense for Israel to use nukes in that context. Even
especially considering back when Japan was nuked, if the United States at that time was the only country in the world that had nuclear weapons, right? Because this is not just a conversation of there's a lot of pressure, not just internally for the
So there's a lot of pressure, not just internally for the Zionists, but externally by literally everyone else, because we're talking about a nuclear holocaust at that point.
I mean, guys, you don't have to imagine like the big nuke, but the use of tactical, like the small nuke that will kill like 10K, 20K people. It's really possible in that region. And for Middle East, 10K, 20K people dead is acceptable sacrifice to reach their strategic goals.
Well, I have a question about that actually, because they were talking about with Khamenei in United Nations, I believe. I don't know all the ins and outs. I wasn't following everything a bit, but Khamenei was also talking about Lebanon. He met with the ministries of Lebanon, and they were discussing that that could be the start of it, with Iran going and US intelligent. I don't know.
Well, one of the things I would also like to keep in mind is that the supersonic missiles that Iran has already been proven that they can't be knocked out of the sky by pretty much anything that the West has. So theoretically, between how fast the missiles are and the precision that they have, if Iran sees Israel's moving in this direction, because Israel is not going to snap into this instantaneously. If they were to do this, Iran would have the capacity to knock out the nuclear launch sites in Israel before they would even be able to get off the ground. So another thing to take in consideration.
Yeah, the only red line for resistance, factions, the only red line that that do have nuclear capability for them to use nukes is if it looked as if the Palestinian resistance was imminently lost, was if they were 100% going to lose, and 2 million Palestinians would be successfully ethnically cleansed from Gaza. That is the red line.
Yeah, which, by the way, I'm not saying Iran would be using nuclear heads in that regard. They'd just be using their current weapons to knock out the launch sites before Israel could launch their nuclear weapons.
Right. Yeah. So is nuclear exchange, even with suitcase nukes, tactical nukes, is that a possibility? Sure. I don't see it happening right now, because Israel isn't in a position to do that when they're just gonna, when they know that would be, I guess that would be another red line for Iran to use nukes, is if Iran used them first, and Iran knows that. Again, they really don't want to get wiped off the map because they're not from there. They're from Poland and Russia and like all these other, and France and all these other. They're not willing to die for. They're not willing to die for Israel. Maybe like a faction of the hardcore right wing is, but that's not all of them. Like international flights out of Ben Gurion Airport are booked for the next 6 months. If you didn't know, people are desperately trying to get out of that country. They're not willing to die there. So
that's part of the reason why
that would also
mean
they're not willing to use nukes to like to end the conflict like that way, because they don't want to die in nuclear fire for their cause. So,
I mean, sorry guys if I'm interrupting, but Iran will never use nukes to protect Palestinians. Let's be honest. It is my opinion, at least. The presence of Israel itself is very beneficial for Iran, as it draws attention away from the Sunni Muslims, right? And it will fight through the proxy means, like some moderate weapons, but for 2 million people to defend them, Iran, no. And at the same time, what I don't agree with is actually Israel and Iran had history of cooperating together. So if they want to work in a team, they can. But for some reasons, both sides like refuse to negotiate or refuse to sit on the table. Waiting game, and everything was pretty symbolic because everything started on like 50th anniversary after Yom Kippur War, like 50 years ago, and it's just, I think Israel went all in, like while America has financial power, while everything's intact, while Democrats are still in power. So okay, this is our last chance, guys, now or never.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Again, would Iran not use missiles to defend Palestine? I mean, I disagree with you there. I think they would, but I mean, we'll have to see. Analyze the situation. Yeah, and if anyone else wants to hop in, ask a question, because I need to hop out in a couple of minutes. But Esoterodactyl, you had your hand up.
Good afternoon, meatbags. Awesome room, Joey, Ty, Barracks. This was awesome. I was kind of driving. I just got in. I just wanted to reiterate, Joey, you pointed out something really, really important. Two things, actually. I mean, everything you said, I agree with everything you brought up. But two things, I think that's a really good message to pass on at the end of the talk. One, you mentioned that this is not the issue at this point, at this stage of capitalism and imperialism. It's not a matter of red and blue. It's not a matter of party politics anymore. I think there's evidence beyond a shadow of a doubt that these are the same. It's not even two sides of the same coin. They're exactly the same people. They're being funded by the same people. We've arrived at a point that corporations have monopolized the government, where private sector and government are unified, and all legislation, as you guys mentioned, something like Twitter and how they're cracking down on freedom of expression, is a really, really clear, opaque evidence that in their mind, in their view, the powers that be believe that they've conquered social movements. And so I think that really the only thing that we can do at this point is to organize, and it really starts from the individual. It's just a matter of your neighborhoods. It's a matter of the grocery stores. I always have little pamphlets in my pocket. I always have little pins that I make, whether it's the hammer and sickle, or I got hundreds and hundreds of Palestine pins that I like to give out when I'm shopping. Anybody I come up to, if I'm next to them, I'll give them a pin. This type of action, this type of activity can go. Yeah, I know, TY. It's weird. Every time I do it at a grocery store or something, people are always taken aback. They always say no at first, and then as soon as they see what it is, like, oh yeah, of course. I feel like they're humans. The average person is. What we have to our advantage is that the working class, the people that I know that I relate to, they're all understanding. It's such a fringe minority of people that would be supporting a genocide or supporting a government and a system that oppresses them. I think people intuitively understand that, and that's why the spaces in the last few months has just been completely conquered with these types of spaces where we're talking about communism, and we're talking about organizing and anti-imperialism. It's important to remember that 10 years ago, this couldn't happen, not in public. The US, the EU, Canada in particular, they've spent the last 100 years, since right after the Second World War, they've spent an enormous amount of effort into suppressing, fundamentally Marxist philosophy, Marxist ideology. They've spent a lot of effort to try and suppress that. And it's only been the last, again, 10, 20 years that it's had some form of resurgence. And at present, it's just become something that's not shouted down or explicitly censored, because we have the tools to be able to have these conversations en masse with like dozens of people, hundreds of people, sometimes even more, where they just don't have the apparatus to be able to stop that. So it's, again, it sounds difficult, and it really is. It is tough to get people to talk about it or want to organize. People are intimidated, and they're intimidated by the idea of, for example, unions or having an organization, and people are, we're conditioned to love entertainment and escapism and distractions, whether it's with sports or film or this or that. So it is a challenge to try and grab somebody and pull them away from that and get them so that they turn their head to see reality as it is. But it is, I think it's at this point in time, it's one of the most noble forms of human expression, and it's really for me, again, it's really changed my life. I can't see myself at any point from now till my last breath to not be talking about this, to not be promoting this idea, because it's I think, in as much as I've said this before, as much as it's the imperialists, the colonialists, the Zionists, this is the last opportunity they have to conquer both the spirit, the mind, and the body of the people. But this is also our last opportunity. So as long as, in the same way that the mere existence of Palestinians is an affront to Zionism, just the fact that they exist is a form of resistance, I think we need to follow suit and continue these conversations, and not just among ourselves. While these are great spaces to exchange ideas and share ideas, we really need to take this outside as well, because you will find, it's just like for guys, you understand, for every guy, like, you might talk to 10 girls and maybe 7 of them will say no, but 3 of them will take a chance. They'll take a gamble. And it's, I say that as a guy with a face only a mother could love. So you do have even that minor probability of success again, planting a seed in somebody's mind, I think is a noble endeavor. Excuse me, a noble endeavor, and it's just good karma. It's really just good karma.
I mean, just to hammer home the importance of what you're talking about, when I say that a crisis is coming, I mean like a 2020 level, like global shutdown level crisis. And you need everyone in this space now needs to be going out into the real world and talking to people and making those connections, because when that crisis happens and the world shuts down again, I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe it's world war. Maybe it's another pandemic. I mean, Alex Jones was saying that that the Davos men in the WEF were talking about starting another pandemic. I don't know what it's going to be. I just know that it's going to happen. When it does, you are the only thing standing in between your community and utter anarchy. You are the one, because I'm telling you, it is your responsibility. You have that consciousness now, and you who are listening now, who have been willing to speak up and been willing to speak up for like humanity. It is your responsibility to lead your community when that crisis happens. And it's not going to work unless you are making those connections now. When 2020, I was living in Massachusetts at the time in March, when the government shut down the country in the United States. I was listening to people on social media. People in my town were like, how am I gonna, I can't go to work. How am I gonna get groceries? I can't go to the store for diapers for my kids. So I spent days and hours, 8 hours at a time, because I wasn't going to work. So I just got in my car and I was delivering groceries to people all day. And people remember that. It makes a difference. Yeah, maybe they don't like the word communism, but they're going to like the person who's leading them out of absolute degradation and catastrophe. They remember that. So yeah, Esoterodactyl is right. Joey?
Yeah, I just want to say that, yes, the great calamity is coming, but that doesn't mean we're going to lose. There's a reason I call it the great calamity, because I'm referring to their great reset. And their great reset is going to fail. It's going to be the great calamity of their system. We have to fight, but know that we are speaking from the future right now. We will win. History will be continued. We will be victorious. We shall rise against South and the Far East, in the multipolar world, and those of the working class in the West. We will rise against those who have oppressed us, and we will be victorious, because it is in our history, our whole history, every part of our history. And we will continue that history, because it is not just the legacy of us, but it's the legacy of humanity. And that is my part.
It sounded like you gave a speech from the 1960s, from during the the racial segregation march on Washington. So thank you, Joey.
Yeah, I can't think of a better tone to end off on. I think TY, you wanna round us out, and then we can close the space.
Yeah, just a quick thing. I've been listening, obviously, ever since I've joined, and it's actually kind of fitting that this is right at the end, because I've got a feeling that the person actually stayed all the way till the end. So if you did, thank you. So can't remember exactly how long ago someone sent me a DM saying, "What are you doing in a MAGA space? What the F is wrong with you? What are you doing there? You're not even American. I've heard you on other spaces. You're a Muslim. You shouldn't be on a MAGA space. Why are you there? Why? You should be ashamed of yourself." And this is the kind of message I was receiving. So do you know what I said to this individual? I said, stay, listen. I never cursed back. I just said, listen, don't worry about it. Just stay, listen to what people are saying. That's all I said. Nothing else. And I've got I hope that that person stayed, because what you guys have been talking about has been nothing but beauty, man. Like legit. What Esau said, what Joey said, what Princess said, Victor, the other speakers who were speaking earlier, the barracks. How is this not about humanity, yo? This is beautiful. Like I've really, really enjoyed this space. Joey and Barracks, like they'll tell you if you ask them. Like I sent them DMs as well, like whilst they were speaking. I'm like, yo, I'm so glad I joined this space. I've really loved this. This has been such a good vibe. Um I've followed a few of you guys already, but yo, anytime I see you like in a space again, I'm definitely going to listen to what you guys have to say, because I've learnt a hell of a lot as well. So thank you to everyone who's taken part. People who ain't really spoken and they're just listening, that's cool as well, yo. Like, don't worry about it. But one recommendation that I'd like to make to you two as well, Barrick and Joey, and to anyone who's listening, don't be shy. Like, even if you don't feel confident in speaking, if you've got a question or anything, send it to the hosts. Like, I'm sure they'll read your question out, and if they can't answer it, someone else might be on the panel and the speakers list who might be able to answer for you as well. But yeah, thank you guys. You need to be doing this more often, man. Like, this was awesome. Thank you. God bless everyone.
And thank you for being here. It's a collective effort. Infrared is a collective effort. Trust me, I've been bullying other infrared people for months and months to start having conversations like this, and which is why Joey and I work so hard to make these spaces happen, which is why I have a YouTube, because no one else, you can't rely on someone else to host a conversation, to lift up people's capacity to talk about what ails them. You have to have the internal drive to do it. So it's I will continue bullying infrared, because Didi, when she was here, she was saying that America needs a vanguard, and me and Joey personally believe that infrared is the vanguard, but
and even though she's not here still, I will say special thanks to Sarah of DD Geopolitics for coming into the space and allowing, folks from her community to come in and listen. This is the kind of things that we need to start seeing. Enough with the drama bullshit and start actually building real, genuine coalitions. There is a friendship between the infrared community and DD Geopolitics, and we need to see that flourishes, and we build real bridges between our communities, so we can build more bridges with more communities that are fighting the same struggle. So again, thank you very much, Sarah. I know she's not in the space, but I'm sure everyone will carry that message to her from her community.
Yeah, with that, I'm going to close it out, y'all. We've kept you here long enough. You know the mission. You got to hold the line. Hold the line. If you consider yourself a Marxist-Leninist, hold the line and make sure that the American working class takes power after the dark night of the soul that we must all pass through, that we are going through right now as we inch toward World War III, that we are the ones who take power to defend the rights of Americans. And if you are pro-Palestine, then you go out there and you continue defending the resistance who defends the rights of humanity from their little corner of the world. Go forth. We release you.
Barx, I have one more question. Can you just like and share my post on the Action for Gaza? Because Rashida Tlaib was silenced on the Congress floor for saying free Palestine, river to the sea, and need for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid. And guess what? Now they're calling her what we want to use, the T word or the H word. And it was horrible, but I couldn't go to the March on Washington. One, I was scared of my work involvement because I work in healthcare, and we got a message that it could jeopardize our healthcare. But anyhow, I also couldn't get on the bus But anyway, guys, share and like, text ceasefire to the number provided. If you're in America, call your congressman, you know, and sign the petition. Everything's there in the marking. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it, Lauren.
100%. We appreciate you coming on to spread the good word.